Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lauren Izzo. And coming up in this edition, Israel is normalizing ties with more Arab countries. But could peace with the Palestinians be further than ever? Then a COVID-19 clash in the Knesset. Some ministers say no to a holiday lockdown. And ahead of those holidays, Israelis enjoy their favorite musician from a distance. Today marks 27 years since the Oslo Accords were signed. That famous handshake between Yitzhak Rabin, Yasser Arafat, and Bill Clinton on the lawn of the White House took place September 13th, 1993. A changing day in Israel's relationship with the Palestinians. After secret talks were held in Norway between the Israelis and the PLO, the two sides agreed that interim Palestinian government would be established in the West Bank and Gaza, and that Israel would completely disengage from the Strip. A step toward real lasting peace, or at least that's what they thought at the time. Now, nearly 3 decades later, peace between Israelis and Palestinians seems further than ever. Now Israel is normalizing relations with several Arab countries. First the United Arab Emirates, now Bahrain. And more could be on the way. But the Palestinians feel that they might be being left in the dust. Nittany Manson reports.
You will hear something today that's, I think, very, very important for not only the Middle East, but for the world. In the spirit of peace and cooperation, both leaders also agreed that Bahrain will fully normalize its diplomatic relations with Israel.
In addition to the UAE, a second Arab country will take part in a meeting at the White House this week to officially pen a normalization agreement with Israel.
We've been working on this for many years. But we wouldn't come to this historic moment without the forceful leadership of President Trump and his able team.
They will exchange embassies and ambassadors, begin direct flights between their countries, and launch cooperation initiatives across a broad range of sectors, including health, business, technology, education, security, and agriculture. This is a truly historic day.
Israelis largely welcoming the deal, while for Palestinians living in the West Bank, it isn't necessarily about peace.
The Bahrain American-Israeli agreement to normalize relations is now part of a bigger package in the region. It's not about peace. It's not about relations between countries. We are witnessing an alliance, a military alliance being created in the region. Maybe they want to call it an Arab-Israel-NATO.
Ramallah has summoned its ambassador to return from Manama. In Gaza, officials also responded, calling the move a threat to the alliance of the Arab world. Palestinians also calling for a day of rage on September 15th, the day of the Washington signing. And meanwhile, Trump is hailing a new era for the Middle East.
All of the many elements of fighting and hate, they seem to be evaporating, and we'll find out very soon, but they seem to be evaporating. So things are happening in the Middle East that nobody thought was even possible to think about, and that's what's going on right now.
Nittany Manson, ILTV.
Dr. Mordechai Kedar, Middle East expert, joins us now to break this all down for us. Thank you, sir, for joining us, as always. Now, we know that on Tuesday, a representative from the UAE and Bahrain will be in Washington to sign those deals. What exactly is the significance of these deals being signed on the week of the anniversary of the Oslo Accords? Is there a significance to that?
Look, just to remind you, those agreements were meant to bring a Palestinian state 5 years after the establishing of the Palestinian Authority in mid-1994.
So are these deals in general bringing the Israelis and Palestinians closer together or further apart?
Depends who is the Palestinians which you are talking about. If it's the group or the bunch of criminals whom Israel by mistake brought from Tunisia in 1993-4, definitely they are apart from Israel because they don't want to see Israel at all. While the people in the street, those who live in this country, those the Arabs, and it's okay with them, they want, especially after the experience of the last 27 years, they want to live peacefully with Israel and let those this gang of criminals which Israel by mistake brought from Tunisia, let them go to hell.
Dr. Kedar, I'm sure you're aware that last week Donald Trump was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. What do you think are the chances that maybe Netanyahu might be nominated eventually as well after all these normalization agreements? Or do you think these deals have been largely negotiated only by Trump?
Well, as much as I heard, the number of laureates can be only up to 3. I'm not sure, but this is what I heard. So if Netanyahu is there, you need also somebody from the Emirates, like Mohammed bin Zayed, for example. But what with the Bahraini? So here we have a little problem. I really don't know how to answer this question. Because if Trump is the laureate and Netanyahu and Mohammed bin Zayed and the number is restricted to 3, so what are you going to do? I really don't know.
Well, I guess that means they're out of options. Dr. Moti Kedar, thank you very much, as always.
No problem.
Staying with that Bahrain deal, this is also the first time Israelis can connect with various Jewish communities throughout the Arab world. While the leader of Bahrain's Jewish community, for one, is looking forward to meeting Israelis and sharing their local customs. Here's what he had to say.
We are, B'Shem Hashem, we are also very excited about this agreement. And we hope very much that we will all benefit from it. And actually, we are sure that we will all benefit from it. And that we will see visitors from your beautiful country to come over to Bahrain, and visitors going over there to tour your country as well. It was a big surprise for us, but a wonderful surprise. There was a very large community in the 1920s and 30s. We have a synagogue that was built in the 1930s. We have our own cemetery as well. And we are very well connected inside the society of Bahrain with the Bahrainis. We view ourselves as Bahrainis, and we have the cultures. We have the culture of Bahrainis. And I think when you see visitors coming over here, there'll be many visitors who are related to those people who used to live here, who will want to come back and see how their parents lived, and to see any relatives who were buried in our cemetery. That's what I expect to happen.
And while many in the UAE celebrated that deal, in Bahrain, the reaction was a little bit more mixed. Here's what he had to say about his experience among the Jewish community and about the origins of the small Bahraini Jewish population.
We have a diversity of opinion. We have a diversity of religions. All mixed into one, and with that you will find that there's a lot of empathy that will go towards this idea, and we're very happy to see that we will find solutions from this coming together of the relationship. We are sure of it, and the solutions will be more understanding between the peoples. In the 1920s, there was a community of over 800 Jews, and they were all traders. They all came from, they started coming from Iraq, because Bahrain was the trading post. At the turn of the century, Bahrain was the trading post between Europe and India. So there were always opportunities here in Bahrain.
Well, in addition to Bahrain's Jewish community, many Israelis are also celebrating the new era of normalization. An orchestra in the city of Beersheba played a special tribute at a concert over the weekend, the national anthem of the UAE, ahead of Wednesday's meeting in Washington. Take a listen.
Thank you very much for attending our concert. We will start with a little surprise. We'll play you 2 national anthems. One, the Israeli one, and the other one of the United Emirates, with whom we are going to sign a peace treaty. And to our friends over there, I would like to say that we would love to play this program also in Abu Dhabi.
the 12th consecutive Saturday, protesters demonstrated in Jerusalem over corruption charges against the prime minister and his handling of the pandemic.
I came to protest about the occupation and about the social situation in Israel. That's very bad. People don't have food in their fridge. People don't have a job, don't have a future. So we have to make a change very quick.
I think it's time for Bibi to go away and leave us alone, and not alone, I mean without him, and let him figure out what to do with all these accusations he's got against him.
Moving on now, Yaakov Litzman, Israel's construction and housing minister and former health minister, resigning from his post today over the government's intention to lock down the country over the Jewish high holidays. In a letter to the prime minister, Litzman said he regretted the potential lockdown would prevent many Jewish Israelis from attending services to observe the holiday, which is among the most important on the Jewish calendar. Well, the countrywide lockdown that the government has been debating could start on Friday, as Israel's COVID-19 infection rate climbs to be among the highest in the world. The cabinet coming to a much-anticipated final decision in a meeting earlier today.
Since Saturday, the health ministry recorded 2,651 new cases with 130 people on ventilators, and the death toll has risen to 1,103.
Israel is already preparing for a new closure that will begin during the holidays, but it could come with a high price. What is the cost of closing an entire country? Professor Naomi Feldman served as a White House tax expert and as Prime Minister Netanyahu's economic advisor. From the Department of Economics at the Hebrew University, she joins us to explain what is expected to happen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, experts estimate on the basis of data from the first closure that in the next closure, if it continues from Rosh Hashanah until Sukkot, it's expected to cost the Israeli economy about 13 billion shekels. Is that correct?
So that sounds about correct to me. So where do these numbers come from? There is a way to measure GDP that divides between a typical workday and a weekend, because we know that a weekend typically adds less to the gross national product. These are the goods and services that a country produces, less than a workday. So you can think about a shutdown as essentially switching from a workday to a weekend or a Shabbat. So what were to happen if we were essentially to take 2 weeks and change them all from typical working days into Shabbats, or days when people are not working? So there are estimates, for example, from the United States that they say roughly about, this costs roughly about 0.1% for every day that you switch from a workday to a weekend. So if you take these 2 weeks as roughly 10 days, this represents roughly about 1% of GDP. GDP in Israel is about 1.3 trillion shekels. So this comes out to about 13 billion shekels. Now, this could be an overestimate or an underestimate, because we know that switching from a workday during a shutdown to what we would think of as a weekend isn't 100% correct, because there are some people that continue to work. They can telecommute and things like that. But we also know that this could be an underestimate, because a weekend people are going out, they're spending money, they're going to restaurants, and in a shutdown, they can't be doing that. So there are pressures on both sides, but roughly the estimate of 13 billion sounds about accurate to me.
Right. Like you said, a lot of people, of course, aren't going to be able to go to work during a lockdown. So what is the Ministry of Finance offering to business owners and, the unemployed who will not be able to work during this upcoming closure?
So the government has already offered a number of policies. For example, unemployment now has been extended through June of 2021. There are a number of policies and packages that they are working with small business owners. To my knowledge, nothing new has been offered in event of a shutdown right now, but I'm sure there are people in the government that this is part of the negotiation. I'm sure amongst the ministers, I don't speak for the government, that something would have to be, some sort of policies would have to take into account the damage being done to society from the shutdown.
Right, and no matter what the finance ministry is offering, obviously it's going to cost a lot of money and it could come out of the pockets of citizens of Israel. So what is it going to do to Israeli taxes? How is it going to affect everyone in the country?
So right now, I don't see it having much effect on people. In actuality, I would see many government policies that will be used to stimulate the economy would in fact actually reduce taxes. So perhaps VAT could go down, income taxes can be reduced, bureaucracy can be reduced to help businesses get back on their feet. In the long run, and again, what is exactly the long run? Perhaps many, many years after we have solved this particular corona crisis, then we have exited perhaps the more traditional type recession that can inevitably come from going through this period. Then we could start thinking about what can be done to perhaps raise taxes, perhaps to cut back on expenses, perhaps to find ways to make our economy more efficient. But I wouldn't worry about paying those costs right now. Right now, we need to stem the flow of the damage, and we need to get that under control. And then we can worry about paying it, and we don't have to pay it back, the day after we have, found a vaccine and we've ended the corona crisis. We could potentially have a decade or more to actually pay this back.
All right, before we wrap, I just want to ask you, of course, this is affecting many countries, the entire world, not just Israel. How is Israel, the way they're dealing with the economic part of the COVID-19 crisis, comparing to other countries around the world?
So I think Israel has been a little bit late to the game. I think many of the policies that Israel is enacting in the last month or two, these were policies that were enacted back in many countries back in March and April. We didn't know a lot back in March and April, and so many countries sort of threw the book at all various sorts of policies, helping businesses, helping individuals, and things like that. Now that we've had the perspective of time, we can perhaps learn a little bit what has worked and what hasn't worked in many other countries, but every country is unique in the health aspect, and that is really the most important thing right now, is solving the health aspect. Israel is going through a particularly difficult time right now, perhaps harder than many or most other countries in the world. And so the economic policies that will work in one particular country might not work here.
Right. Of course, this is a learning process for the entire world. Professor, thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Well, Tel Avivians are taking advantage of their freedom before that expected lockdown begins. Israeli musician Idan Reichel played in front of 1,000 socially distanced fans at the outdoor venue at Hayarkon Park. Sitting in capsules of up to 20 people, fans had to be seated throughout the entire concert and, of course, keep their masks on. So the global pandemic is affecting the quality of life of those who suffer from severe health problems. Requests from disabled IDF veterans to the Ministry of Defense for at-home rehabilitation devices have doubled. So hospitals and companies that specialize in physiotherapy are trying to find solutions. Eyal Sadot, CEO of Tsora Active Systems, is joining us to tell us more about this. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
So please start by explaining, how do your solutions work exactly?
Well, I came here now to tell you that actually we provide now rehabilitation device to work at home. Till today, our device that was sold all over the world, a lot of thousands of devices, we build it in a way to be used in institutes or in hospital, in rehabilitation department of hospital. And now, because of the coronavirus and the COVID-19 epidemic, we got a very big demand of people that actually ask us to build something, to design something that will be good practice at home.
Okay.
So I can give you some examples,
sure,
like...
That's my next question.
Yeah. I can give you a soldier from the IDF, for instance, that is paralyzed, and he called us and said, well, I'm used to practice with your APT in the clinic, in the IDF clinic. But
can you just explain to our viewers what exactly APT stands for?
Okay, so the APT is active passive trainer, is a cycling trainer that the patient is working with hands or his legs, or hands and legs in the clinic, and he moves like cycling the pedals. And it's also, we have inside a device that can protect him from spasm, that when the muscles is stopped working, so the device knows that, and he stop working or move forward and release the stiffness.
Okay, and you also have a collaboration with Israel's Tel HaShomer hospital, correct?
Yes, right. So because of this situation, Tel HaShomer as well wants to build a telerehabilitation solution, because they don't want that people will come back to the hospital after they was released and practice with the rehabilitation products. So they decided to work from home. So they build a solution together with our device, and they can build a plan for this kind, or these people to work at home, and they collect all the data from our device that we build specially for this solution, and they can build the plan again and to be after what the patient is doing.
So what are the main differences between at-home rehabilitation and in-hospital rehabilitation? And what's some of the feedback you're getting from some of your clients?
So to be honest, it's something new in this area, because people knows that they have to go to the institute, they got some missions, they do it and go home. But between the times they come back, they don't do anything. Right. Now there is a solution that rise up because of the COVID-19, and they can continue working at home. During that, people is looking what they are doing, and they can feel better.
So it might make them stronger at the end of the day because of it.
We took the lemon and make a lemonade, because we understood that actually this will give them more opportunity to work at home.
All right. Eyal Sadot, thank you so much for being with us
today.
Thank
you very much.
Moving on now, Gal Gadot, Israel's beloved Wonder Woman, will have to wait a bit longer to show off the latest installment in her DC Comics career. The release of Wonder Woman 1984 is being delayed yet again due to COVID-19. The movie was originally set to hit theaters in early June, then postponed to August, then October. Now it's set to hit screens on Christmas Day. The first installment of Wonder Woman was the highest-grossing film of summer 2017, and sources from Warner Brothers say the uncertainty over the release is largely due to confusion regarding the reopening of cinemas around the world. Okay, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be a low of 74 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 degrees Celsius with clear skies, and tomorrow will be a high of 89 Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. And just before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Well, that is a 1-month-old kitten named Star. Look how adorable. She belongs to Yafit Weitzman from Yavne, Israel, who said sometimes we all need a lift to get where we want to go. That is very adorable. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.46 shekels to the American dollar and 2.58 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Lauren Izzo. Thanks so much for watching.